In this section, I want to discuss how to understand the role of the cap in ETS. And there are differences between an absolute cap and intensity cap, what kind of cap we can set, and what kind of background information, data we need to set the cap, and then how to design and manage the cap in the long run. So what is a ETS cap? So the cap is the amount of greenhouse gases that can be emitted by the covered entities over a specific time. So we are talking about a limitation of emission. And then we're also talking about time. There are two dimensions we are talking. So and then how far could GHG emission can be reduced? That shows the ambition of the cap. And here are several points we can discuss here. First of all, we need to align the cap ambition and the target emission, or the NDC. Every jurisdiction have its climate target. It covers the overall economic emission, but we only choose some scope, some sectors to cover in ETS. And so the ETS goal should be aligned with the regional or the jurisdiction overall target. And then it also needs to consider other key features. We have the cap for the carbon market, but we also have banking and borrowing. So if the cover entities, they didn't emit that much, so they have some allowance as surplus, then they can bank to the future. Or the government can say no banking. That's also an option. So and other things like market stability reserve mechanism and use offset. This can also change how much emission can be emitted under ETS. So this also aligns with the cap setting. And also, when we set the cap, we will need to think about the balance between the ambitions and the costs. If we set the cap very tight, we ask them to reduce emission a lot. It's good for the environment, we like it, but it will also bring a lot of pressure to the economic. They may suffer a lot of increased costs that can harm the industry's competitiveness. And then we also need to think about the share between cap or uncapped sectors, or ETS and non-ETS sectors. And also the share of domestic emission abatement efforts. So yeah, I will not go into details, but there are a lot of things we need to consider how to set the cap, how ambitious it should be. And so there are some indicators to reflect how ambitious ETS is. And that some of them are reflecting the cap setting, some of them are reflecting the market price. For example, if we see a very tight cap and it reduces very fast, that it means it's high ambitions. For example, right now, EU ETS, it reduced 4.4% every year. And China ETS doesn't have a goal to reduce how much emission, so we will say EU ETS is more ambitious than the China ETS. And also it reflects on the carbon price. We know EU ETS is 70, 80 euros per ton, and other ETS maybe like UK is 40, 50 euros, California is 20, 30, China is 10. So we would say right now EU ETS has the highest carbon price. It also reflects the emissions level. And the total cost they paid, especially they paid through the auctioning, they paid directly to the government. That also shows how much how tight the cap is and how much ambitious it is. And there are different approaches to set the cap. One is top-down approach. The government will say, oh, right now we have the total number of emissions for the base year, maybe for the last 2 years or for this year. And then we ask the whole carbon market to reduce some percentage every year. So the government, they set the target from top, and they don't need to consider all the detailed level of each installation or each company. They just say, oh, the whole cap reduce some percentage every year is top down. Just come direct from the top. And there are other approaches. Another one is bottom up. So the government, they don't set the target at the very beginning. They just calculate the allowance from each company, each installation, and then they add up to add up and sum them up, then calculate as a cap. So there are two approaches to calculate the cap. And of course, the top-down approach, it gives more predictability to the market, and it shows the long-term ambitions better than the bottom-up approach. But in reality, there are some ETS use bottom-up, some use allowance from each member states, and then eat up and then become the EU ETS cap. But in the second and third phases, EU ETS, they centralize the cap setting and allocation. So from the second and the third phase, EU ETS start to have a top-down cap. So it can be changed. It can be a hybrid. Right now, some other jurisdictions like China is completely bottom-up, calculate each company first, and then sum up as a cap for the market. So there are different approaches, and we have more. This slide is based on the ETS handbook that ICAP and World Bank jointly developed. So you are welcome to go to ICAP website or World Bank website, download this ETS handbook. We have more case to discuss these two approaches. And then there are two kinds of cap in general where we talk about. So yeah. Sorry, I need to delete this most common. Right now, actually, intensity cap covers more emissions than the absolute cap. So absolute cap is more common at the very beginning for the more developed countries or jurisdictions. So it's kind of a carbon budget approach. Exciting, yeah, absolute cap. So under this absolute cap design, the government, they set the budget for the whole carbon market, and it's an absolute number, and it could increase or decrease, but it's an absolute number. It's maybe, for example, 600 million tons or 1 billion tons is an absolute number. How much emission you can emit every year, that the market already knows. For example, EU has some absolute number, maybe 2 billion at the very beginning and reduce every year. And Korean market has 700 million tons, but it increased. But at least the market knows an absolute number, how much they can emit. But for intensity cap, the they don't have an absolute number. They only have the benchmark. So if the company, they have intensity higher than the benchmark, they need to buy. And if they have intensity lower than the benchmark, they can sell. And if it doesn't matter, they produce more or less. If a company, they have higher intensity and they produce more, they will lose more money. They produce less, they lose less money, but they will lose anyway because their intensity is higher than the benchmark. In the other case, if a company has the intensity lower than the benchmark, performance better, then the more they produce, the more money they can earn, the more allowance they can earn, more surplus. But they produce less, then they earn less, but they still earn. So it doesn't matter how much they produce. However, in the absolute cap, the production level is also a limit. There's also a limit for production level because you cannot easily reduce your intensity forever. So there's always a limit. So that I would say one important difference between absolute cap and intensity is whether do you want to limit the production level of certain type of product. Like if we have absolute cap for power sector, then it means you really want to phase out fossil fuel power generation and switch to renewable energy. Yeah. But for intensity, it means you will only want to control the efficiency of power of fossil fuel power, but you are not really phase them out. So that's the major difference. And how do we choose between these two? So we need to align with the national target. So if, like in EU, there's already a national, the EU NDC saying it will reduce every year as the whole EU. So the ETS should also have this absolute reduce. But for example, China doesn't peak yet. China say, oh, we will peak before 2030 and we don't know the peak number. So also that's why China ETS doesn't have the absolute number as a cap. And also we need to consider the data requirement for setting the cap. I'll talk about the data requirement later, and consider future linking. If the system wants to link with other system, then you need to consider the other system, what kind of cap they have. For example, there are in the US, the California ETS start first, and then Quebec, they want to have their own ETS and then link to California. So you must have the same design as California. Yeah, so that kind of, if you want to link with other system, that must align. And there are pros and cons for these two caps. And for absolute cap, it provides more environment integrity because it provides certainty about the total amount of emissions. But for intensity cap, there's no certainty of the total amount. So if the company, the whole industry, they produce more and they will emit more greenhouse gases. Yeah. And for the economic flexibility, absolute cap are not as flexible as intensity base. So if there's a financial crisis or if there's a new demand of some product, the absolute cap may become a problem. But in the intensity-based cap is more flexible. You only consider the efficiency, so the companies, they can reduce or increase the capacity. They only need to meet the benchmark target, so it's more flexible. And for the price volatility, and the absolute cap, the price change more in the absolute cap, and for the intensity cap, the price is more stable. Yeah. So this figure is from the latest ICAP status report that launched last month. It shows the dark blue are the jurisdictions using absolute cap, and the light blue are the jurisdictions using intensity cap. And we can see from the covered emission, the absolute cap only covers 27% of all these ETS. And 73% emissions are covered by intensity cap. Of course, one major reason is China, India. These two big emitters are using intensity cap. But also from the map, we can see a lot of jurisdictions, they are actually choosing intensity cap, like right now, Australia, Indonesia, some North American states and provinces. So yeah, I would say right now this intensity cap is becoming mainstream. Okay, two case studies, so we can see EU, when they launch the ETS, it's always absolute cap. It's always an absolute number. And we can see the trajectory of the cap till 2030. And as Leon already mentioned, right now there is another review going on. We may see some changes in the ETS after 2030, but there's always an absolute cap reduction, reduced every year, and it provides certainty. It shows the scarcity of the allowance. Company knows there will be less and less allowance, which means they can emit less and less greenhouses. It really provides a long-term signal to the company, and they can plan this in their long-term investment plan. And the other example is China. China is like the output-based benchmark method to decide the allowance. I will talk about the allocation plan later in the afternoon, but in short, the government will decide the allocation measure for the company. And the company and the provincial government, they will calculate the allowance for each company in this province, and then they sum up, and this will be the province allowance. And then all the province, they submit their number to the MEE, the Ministry of Ecological Environment, to the central government. Then that becomes the national cap. Yeah, so that's how China calculates the total number of allowance under China ETS. And then the central government will issue this allowance in the registry to the provincial government, and the provincial government will issue this to each company. So like I said, it's a bottom-up approach. And under this bottom-up approach, the major requirement is the benchmark. So right now, China uses 100% free allocation, and the benchmark shows how much the industry, in this case is the power sector, how much the power sector needs to reduce. So we can see from the 2022 to 2024, the benchmark value declines every year. So it shows the government's requirement, how much they need to reduce. It's not reducing the actual emission, it's reducing the emission intensity. Yeah, so that shows how it works. So as a summary, both intensity and absolute cap, they can accommodate for emission growth. Some people will argue that we haven't peaked yet, we don't have absolute cap number, but like I said, Korea, they also have an absolute cap, but it's increasing. Or you can change the design of the absolute cap. So even there are still some growth expected, the ETS can also design an absolute cap for that. And intensity-based cap are more difficult to translate into sector or installation-specific allocation. And it's also difficult to see like the contribution of each sector, and then how to balance between each sector in intensity base. But with absolute cap, it's easier to balance between, or we don't need to consider the balance. Yeah. The third line is a little bit outdated. We would say now more intensity systems are running and it's becoming mainstream. Yeah. And absolute and intensity targets can be combined under ETS. So for example, in some Chinese pilots, they use some sectors with absolute number based on their historical emission reduced every year. But some sectors is based on their actual output using benchmark, and it's an intensity-based method. They combine these two together under one ETS. And right now, China is also want to transit from intensity-based cap to absolute cap, and they want to choose one or two sectors more ready to transfer to absolute cap first. So we may see right now Chinese government is doing the research. So maybe next year we will see maybe one or two sectors will use absolute cap first, and other sectors will use intensity cap, and then they can still be and then they can still trade among each other. How does that work, and what is the impact of the market? I don't know. We still need to do more research and observe. But yeah, it's possible to do it. Okay. Up till now, any questions? Yeah.
It's actually a very interesting topic. So I'm looking to DCCE colleagues again and wondering if you have the group of industry that you maybe, for example, mentioned by Sibin that the power sector, if we like to phasing that out, the absolute number will be more effective. And then the other, because we in our like UNIDO consultation with industries, lots of industries propose to be based on intensity, because they like intensity could link with the product, right? So if they would like to expand the business, that could be more efficient. So then I like to maybe DCC could share some thought on this. Thank you.
ก็ขอบคุณครับก็ในส่วนของความเห็นของทางกรมนะครับก็อันนี้ก็อ้างอิงตามที่ได้มีผลการศึกษามานะครับก็วิธีการจะใช้เรื่องของเซกเตอร์ก่อนเซกเตอร์ที่เข้ามานี่ก็มีความใกล้เคียงกับที่ทางซีบิลนำเสนอเหมือนกันประเทศไทยก็คิดว่าน่าจะใช้ลักษณะในการกำหนดเซกเตอร์ใกล้เคียงกันนั่นก็คือเซกเตอร์ที่อาจจะมีการเป็นฮาร์ดแวร์เซกเตอร์มีการปล่อยก๊าซเรือนกระจกสูงแล้วก็จะได้รับผลกระทบจากนโยบายทางด้านกิจการทางการค้าของต่างประเทศด้วยซึ่งก็ใกล้เคียงกันเซกเตอร์ซีเมนต์อลูมิเนียมเหล็กและเหล็กกล้าอะไรประมาณนี้ครับเนี่ยน่าจะคิดว่าน่าจะโดนน่าจะเข้าข่ายในช่วงของ ETS ก่อนเพราะว่า โดยทางนโยบายของกรมนะตอนนี้ครับก็คือถ้าเกิดว่ามีระบบ ETS ขึ้นมาเนี่ยมันก็จะต้องมีระบบThailand CBAM ขึ้นมาเพื่อทำให้พวกผู้ประกอบการในกลุ่มเหล่านี้ครับที่ดำเนินการอยู่เนี่ยสามารถคงเสถียรภาพในการแข่งขันในตลาดได้อยู่นะครับก็อาจจะใกล้เคียงกันส่วนในเรื่องของแคปเรื่องของปริมาณการแคปเนี่ยก็ณขณะนี้ก็คืออ้างอิงจากผลการศึกษาที่มีนั่นแหละแต่ว่าอย่างที่นำเรียนไปครับว่าผลการศึกษาเนี้ยครับอาจจะมีการปรับเปลี่ยนได้อาจจะมีการขยายขอบเขตเรื่องของแคปหรือว่าลงดีเทลในการพิจารณาในการจะใช้วิธีไหนในการจะ benchmarking หรือว่าจะดูจากผลการผลิตหรือว่าจะดูจากการ parenting ใดๆเนี่ยเรื่องเกี่ยวกับเทคนิคในเชิงลึกเนี่ยเดี๋ยวจะต้องมีการศึกษาเพิ่มเติมอีกทีซึ่งณขณะนี้ก็อาจจะแชร์ได้ก็คือว่ากรมก็ได้รับความสนับสนุนจากทางWorld Bank นะครับในโครงการของ PMI ในการศึกษาดีเทลเรื่องนี้อยู่ที่อาจจะให้เหมาะสมกับบริบทของประเทศไทยอยู่ครับก็ผลการศึกษาก็น่าจะแล้วเสร็จในช่วงกลางๆปีหน้าในประมาณควอเตอร์2ของปีหน้าครับและซึ่งขณะนั้นเนี่ยควบคู่กันไปก็ทางการพิจารณาการออกกฎหมายของระดับของคณะกรรมการกฤษฎีกาคาดว่าก็น่าจะแล้วเสร็จแล้วก็น่าจะอยู่ในใกล้เคียงในการจะเริ่มประกาศใช้และอาจจะมีการผลการศึกษานี้จะนำมาเป็นกรอบแนวทางในการออกอนุบัญญัติระดับเป็นสับลอลงไปในการบังคับใช้อีกทีหนึ่งครับ
Can I have maybe one or two more questions to Sipin? You mentioned that the EU ETS always using absolute. Is
or some production, or the purpose is to phase out some fossil fuel based production. And yeah, if we phase out coal-fired generation, gas-fired generation, there will be transit to renewable. We are not saying stop generation. Yeah, so I think that's the general idea. And my personal opinion, I support the absolute cap. Actually, we name ICAP, and it's obviously we support cap and absolute cap. And even China use the intensity cap, and it also transit to absolute cap. Right now, we must reduce our emission, we achieve carbon neutrality by the mid-century. So it's important that we have an absolute reduction. So I think that's the final goal. And Korea, they also they are not adjusting the absolute cap. They have absolute number of the cap for, I think I remember it's 3 years a phase. So they would at the end of every phase they will review and they will have the absolute number for the next 3 phases. So previously it increased a little bit, yeah, but it also may due to sector expansion, other consideration. Yeah, but I just meant even you set the absolute cap for the next 3 years, this absolute cap can be an absolute number increasing, but it's still a limitation. Even an increasing number is still a limitation. Yeah. Do you want to?
I have a question and comment. May I first? For the intensity cap, it's new for me. This is my first time to know about this information. My question is, in terms of academic, between the absolute cap to the intensity cap, if we have the number to calculate from the country that EU experience from the absolute cap to become the intensity cap in some sector is good for developing country to follow in the future. And I think based on my analysis from your lecture, I think intensity cap is very interesting in the long run. But of course, like China, I think it's good for China to choose the intensity cap because they produce a lot around the world. They produce like the global manufacturing. But based on the small country and open economy like Thailand, I think maybe we follow absolute cap is more easier. But based on our พระราชบัญญัติ our legislation, our draft of law, we have we divide firm into two categories. One is the controlled, in another is reported. From the reported is follow your lecture that is from the bottom up. But in the future, probably we can calculate the total release in the future, and we can follow the absolute cap. I think it's more easy. That's my opinion.
Yeah, for choosing between absolute or intensity, it also need to consider a lot of situation. And at least I can speak from my experience in China, that China choose intensity cap because the country is so huge. Even though, well, Korean, like I said, Korean can set the absolute cap with increasing number, but China is like much, like 10 times bigger than Korea, and it's so difficult to get all the information to set the absolute cap, especially without the without absolute declining national NDC. So, but from the speech yesterday, I saw Thailand already peak. The total emission already start to decline. So I think it's a good sign that Thailand can start to do absolute cap. And even in China, people are talking about the steel sector, the cement sector, they already peak. So the government already thinking, since they peak, it's good time to introduce absolute cap. Yeah.
I have a question to Mr. Visarud from DCC. You caught my attention when you said Thailand needs a CBAM to protect competitiveness. In the EU, CBAM is replacing the system of free allocation because under our cap, we don't have enough allowances anymore to maintain the system of free allocation. As I understood it yesterday, I was assuming that you start with a system of free allocation and would protect competitiveness through this. When you say we need CBAM, does that mean that you also plan to phase out free allocation very quickly and replace it through a CBAM, or what is the role of the CBAM you envision in your ETS?
ก็ในส่วนนี้ครับก็เหตุผลส่วนหนึ่งเนี่ยก็คือเป็นการมาจากความต้องการของภาคอุตสาหกรรมของภาคผู้ประกอบการในการที่เรารัฐบาลเนี่ยมีนโยบายที่จะกำหนดสิทธิ์ที่จะจำกัดสิทธิ์ของผู้ประกอบการนะครับเพราะฉะนั้นผู้ประกอบการก็เลยบอกว่าถ้าเกิดว่ารัฐบาลมีนโยบายในการจะจำกัดสิทธิ์แล้วก็จะต้องมีนโยบายในการป้องกันการรั่วไหลของสินค้าที่จะเข้ามาจากต่างประเทศที่มีการปล่อยอิมิชันสูงเนี่ยเข้ามาแข่งขันในตลาดแล้วทำให้ผู้ประกอบการในไทยเนี่ยสูญเสียศักยภาพในการแข่งขันได้อันนี้ก็เป็นเหตุผลที่1นะครับแล้วก็แต่ถ้าเกิดว่าเหตุผลของไทยณขณะนี้ที่จะตั้ง CBAM ควบคู่กับ ETS เนี่ยอาจจะไม่ได้ช่วยด้วยเหตุผลเดียวกับทางสหภาพยุโรปที่เอามาแทนเรื่อง Free Allocation 100% แต่ว่าประเทศไทยมุ่งเน้นเรื่องของการเสริมศักยภาพทำให้ศักยภาพของผู้ประกอบการไทยเนี่ยยังสามารถแข่งขันได้ในขณะที่ณขณะนี้ผู้ประกอบการไทยบางส่วนมีหลายๆเซกเตอร์ที่มีการส่งออกไปที่สหภาพยุโรปแล้วก็เริ่มมีการสูญเสียความสามารถในการแข่งขันในส่วนนี้เพราะฉะนั้น ในส่วนของ Thailand CBAM เนี่ยจะเข้ามาเรื่องของป้องกันเรื่องของการสูญเสียศักยภาพในการแข่งขันซะมากกว่าอาจจะไม่ได้รีเลทกับเรื่องของ free allocation ซะทีเดียวแต่ว่าก็เป็นอีกเหตุผลหนึ่งที่ Thailand CBAM จะสนับสนุนในการที่อนาคตเรื่องของ ETS เนี่ยอาจจะเริ่มตัดเรื่องของ free allocation ลงแล้วก็ใช้กลไกของ CBAM เข้ามาช่วยซัพพอร์ตได้อันนี้ก็จะเป็นอีกเหตุผลหนึ่งประกอบแต่ว่าณขณะนี้เหตุผลหลักก็คือเพื่อให้ขีดความสามารถของผู้ประกอบการไทยที่มีตั้งรับมาตรการที่มีการกีดกันทางการค้าของต่างประเทศเนี่ยสามารถมีศักยภาพในการแข่งขันอยู่ได้ครับ
Yeah, maybe the one last comment.
I just want to give the very ground comments from industry. I'm not sure that the FTI is here or any from FTI because UNIDO through page we just had Green Industry Transition Roadmap discussion on competitiveness. And actually we had received a lot of comments from industry before. Just to be specific, our industry, the upstream is elsewhere, like from China, for example, like steel. And there are green energy steel, and then there are dirty energy steel. So for the reason of export to EU, they need, if we have the Thai CBAM, then that charge can be present to EU that we already charge the dirty upstream raw material before entering manufacturing in Thailand. Yeah. And also for example, like glass and tableware. They also have a lot of product from dirty manufacturing imported, flooded into Thailand. So this Thai CBAM will protect because we will also charge the ETS on glass. For example, if later stage, then this protect the competitiveness, right? Thank you.
Okay, very interesting discussion. I start to see the logic for Thai CBAM, but of course, we don't have enough time here to discuss all the details and how to set reasonable and fair CBAM to align the Thai ETS and EU CBAM. But yeah, interesting topic. We can keep discussing during the breaks. Let's quickly finish this. We may still have time for. Yeah, okay. So there are several considerations when collecting data to set a cap, and especially when we design our MRV system, we need to consider what kind of cap, what kind of allocation methodology we will use, and then to design the MRV system to collect all this required data. And to set the cap, there are several data needed. Of course, the first one is historical emissions and economic data. Yeah, how at least for 3-4 years, historical emission data and production data, economic data are needed, and then there should be a modeling to project of emissions under a baseline. Like our UNIDO colleagues already doing a lot of modeling research, and also there must be some research under the PMI will be developed. And there are also need to consider the technical and economic potential to reduce the emission in cover sectors, and the roles of existing and new companion policies and barriers to mitigate. Like, is there other subsidies to the power sector, or is the power market very, is it a very free market, or are there other like policies with conflict purpose or already supporting the reduction. So we need to consider all these companion policies and see how to let ETS work with these policies. I will not go into the details, but of course, if we have the absolute cap, we need to get the data, set the modeling, and to evaluate the impact, and then set the cap for the long term. Like I said, the EU, it doesn't have the reliable data before 2025, and so it's a bottom-up estimation of allowance, and then after the verification, all the member states find out, oh, actually we estimate too much. The company, they actually didn't emit that much. So in the mid-2006 reports, it finds this over allocate a lot of allowance, and it means everyone already get enough allowance. There's no need to buy any allowance. So we see the carbon price, the EU carbon price in 2025 was like 25 to 30 euros per ton, but after this report, it dropped down to 0. And at that time, the EU decide to no banking. So in the first phase, there are a lot of surplus in the market, and this surplus cannot carry out to 2008. It is like completely rebuild the whole system in 2008. So that shows how difficult to and how much data needed to actually design a reasonable cap. And in China, the government collect the historical data from 2013. So the government has the data from all for the whole nation, starting from 2013, and they launched the market in 2021 only for power sector. So the power sector collect historical data for 7-8 years and then has the ETS. Yeah, that's how long China prepare for the national ETS. So some key options for emission projections, like how do you develop or estimate the trend, and how do you use the historical data to estimate the trend in the longer run. That all these detailed requirement must be considered. I will not go into details of this data. We are not modeling, but just it shows how difficult it is. And we also need to think about the marginal abatement cost curves for different sectors. I'm not sure whether you see this curve before. So each block means one abatement method. So in the horizon, the axis, the price. So it means, so for those in the blue side, they have negative carbon costs. It means this abatement costs, they can earn money. And for the green side, so for example, for energy efficiency improvement projects, if you invest some money, after 2-3 years, you can start to earn money from it. So that's negative carbon costs. And for the green ones are the high cost abatement projects like CCUS. You need to pay actual carbon costs on that. So it's actual positive the carbon cost. And if an industry already has a lot of abatement potential in the blue ones, maybe we can push them more to give them a harder cap because they can have a lot of potential with low cost and even with negative cost. But for the industry which only has these green options, we need to consider the actual cost. Yeah, so this is another thing to another dimension to think about, how to set a cap or how to set the limit for different sectors. And then oh wow, sorry, it just can we play? Yeah, data requirement. So, like I said, setting a cap is a long-term plan, and how do we implement it? First, we need the specific institute to do it. It could be a regulatory institute, a legislative institute, or administrative bodies. But ideally, it should coordinate with the bodies for NDC targets. That the two bodies, or they are in the same body, they can align the NDC target and the carbon market cap setting. Yeah. So, for example, the California Air Resource Board, they are setting and implementing the ETS cap, and they are also responsible for the California NDC to develop the NDC. And in Korea is the Ministry of Environment to set the cap. So we need to find a good governance structure to design and implement the cap setting and to get coordinate with other government departments. Yeah. So and then we need to talk about the details. So all the existing ETS, they has their own domestic allowance, and it's usually in tons. So when we talk about caps, we sometimes we can talk about how many allowance, and it's usually how many tons of emission. Yeah, and then it also needs to consider external units. For example, offset units. If you have a cap for 1 billion tons and you have 5% of offset use, so the actual limitation of emission is 1.05 billion tons, because this 5% can be offset. Yeah. So I think that's also what we are discussing in EU, whether EU ETS can allow to use Article 6 offset in the future is on a debate right now. Yeah. And when we design the cap, we need to think about the cap period. So ideally, it should be a long term, like EU ETS, they have 8 years, 10 years long-term plan, can give industrial some expectation. And in some ETS, like Korea and Kazakhstan, is like 3 years term, and they update it every 3 years. And China right now is doing 1 year. So the longer period, the better expectation give to the market. And then, like I said, it needs to balance flexibility and certainty for the investors. So if it's short term, it provide more flexibility, but less concern the certainty. So it needs to balance between these two. And this cap period should be aligned to broader climate target, like NDC targets and the Paris Agreement, like EU ETS also aligns with EU NDC updates. So that's the same. And to transit from one cap to other cap provides the opportunity to do a lot of major updates for the ETS, like introducing the reserve or change from intensity to absolute or change the benchmark allocation method. So if there is a change from one period to another period, is an opportunity to do the whole ETS reform. Yeah. And yeah, I said we can do changes, but why we make changes, or what kind of change we can make? We change in scope, we introduce cover more scope, or we change the allocation method, and then we can have the reserve to manage market shocks, and then also interact with offsets, like right now we are talking about Article 6, and then also linking with other ETS. Right now, UK and EU, they are negotiating to link the UK ETS and EU ETS together. And resetting the ambitions by defining like long-term trajectory of the cap to see in the long term if we have a new trajectory that we can also change it, reflect in the cap setting. And improve data collection and also to adjust the supply to maintain the appropriate price. So all of this, we observe the market, we see there are necessary changes, and then it also reflects on the cap. In the EU, so since 2013, there is a linear reduction factor, like how the percentage reduced every year, that set up in the EU ETS, because the 2013 was the starting of the third phase of EU ETS, and in the first and second phase, the EU ETS doesn't have a very strong long-term reduction signal, and there was over-allocate. There was the financial crisis, a lot of crisis for the EU ETS and for the EU. So the ETS didn't work as expected in the first and second phase. So since 2013, coming to the third phase, EU Commission introduced this linear reduction factor. Each year reduce some percentage. So it provides the certainty for the cover entities. Yeah. And like at the very beginning, from 2013 to 2020, it reduced 1.74% every year. And from 2021 to 2030, or from 2021 to 2023, it reduced 2.23%. And then after the EU Green Deal, this number raised to 4.3% every year, and it will raise to 4.4% from 2028 to 2030. Yeah, so we see each year it reduce more emission than before, and that shows the ambitions of EU ETS and provide the long-term certainty for the cover entities. And for example, the covered entities, they already foresee there will be limit allowance in the future, so they will buy allowance now, and they will calculate the cost. If the carbon cost is too high, you cannot cover the revenue in the future, cannot cover the cost, so they will start to shuffling the resource. They will close down some old facilities, and they invest to renewable or the new low carbon options technologies. So that's the case from EU. Okay, so that's all I want to discuss today, and there are some questions we can discuss later during the breaks, like what is the role of the cap in the ETS, or what's the role of cap in Thailand ETS? that also relates to other energy and low carbon policies. So you see the major flagship low carbon policy, or is just a safeguard policy to maintain the lower level or the basic level. So what is the role of the Thai ETS, and what background information is needed to set the cap for Thai ETS, and the difference between absolute and intensity cap, how to choose, and how this ETS can contribute to the overall emission reduction target. And so is there any plan to link to any other ETS? And if so, then what should we prepare for that? Okay, thank you very much. And you can find more information in the handbook I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Sipin.
Do we do Q&A?
May I suggest that if you have question, we leave it at the end of the day, right? Okay. ตกลงมีถ้าตกลงเปลี่ยนเป็นว่าถ้ามีคำถามถามเลยครับ A few question maybe.
I don't have question, but just some thought. Maybe number 5 of what Sibin has raised the discussion. But this is on the offsetting. Because when we design the ETS, when we study to design ETS, there's one of the comment from NESDC, National Economic Social Development Council, that the agriculture sector, the SING agriculture, from smart agriculture, as well as the forestry, the LU, the land use, LULUCF. So this one is because when we design, we're thinking of kind of leeway, the exit, or some optional for industry at like very beginning, when they cap and they need the investment, they need the funding, they need the technology transition. Maybe we can have this option offsetting. I understand that you mentioned that 15%, but what we discussed with the agriculture, they said that because the agriculture sector is quite needs some support, and industry is quite advanced. So if it's like a transition period, that we can have more offsetting, more than like 15%. So this forestry, reforestation, and smart agriculture can be supported. This is a kind of like economic drive through ETS. Just for some thought.
Yeah, good comment, but also need to remind it will increase the total emission, right? If you allow them to buy more offsets, the entities, they can emit more actually. So we also need to think about this consequence, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.